In recent years, the European Union has been at the forefront of sustainable energy initiatives. One such initiative is the EU Energy Certificate Programme. This program aims to encourage businesses to adopt greener practices and reduce their carbon footprint by certifying their energy efficiency. These energy certificates, which will become part of the data center legal realm, serve as proof that a company's energy consumption aligns with EU regulations. By obtaining these certificates, businesses can demonstrate their commitment to sustainability, gaining a competitive edge and contributing to a greener future. But the impact of legislation does not stop there. The tidal wave of artificial intelligence is revolutionizing the way data centers operate. Data centers, the backbone of our digital infrastructure, consume vast amounts of energy. However, with AI-powered technologies, these centers can optimize their energy usage, resulting in significant energy savings and reduced environmental impacts. This harmonious convergence of EU energy certificates and AI technology is transforming the data center landscape. And one operator who is at the helm of all that change is EQT-backed EdgeConneX, whose regional headquarters are located in Amsterdam. With the goal of more than tripling its footprint in the coming years, the company is making strides in ensuring that new and future builds are architectured in line with climate goals, no matter what demands they might face. Joining me now to discuss all of the above are EdgeConneX's Anand Ramesh, Senior Vice President for Advanced Technology, Raj Shudgar, Chief Power Officer, and Steven Sportholt, Vice President for Project Management and Sustainability. So, Anand, Raj, Steven, thanks so much for joining me. I think this is a very important topic in the days that we live, but also, of course, crucial to the sector that we all operate within. So let's talk about sustainability and energy and power and how to make sure that operations really help the planet and green companies' operations. To begin with, we are an industry, and the energy industry is the same as well. We all love a bit of jargon. We all love acronyms. We love a lot of terms. Can you maybe explain in very layman terms energy attribute certificates and what are maybe some of the most important keywords within this space when it comes to these certificates? Because even though we report on zero carbon emissions, the system still does emit some carbon. I think maybe you can correct me, but 100% carbon neutral is probably not something achievable. It's about how we get as close to, as opposed to being 100% carbon neutral. So with that, I mean, I will quiet down for now, and I'll let one of you start, and then maybe we can go around the room. So who would like to go first?
Energy attribute certificates are, let's say, a certificate that is being generated by a wind turbine, a solar panel, a hydro turbine for every megawatt hour that is being produced. And this certificate has a site ID on it. So it states, hey, this is the location where this was produced. It also says when it was produced. It has a time index to it. That's especially important because after a year in most jurisdictions, these are voided. And they are a certification that, hey, this megawatt hour was produced by a renewable asset. And these things are very valuable for many different kind of ways. One of the applications for it is that it can show somebody who operates that renewable plant or operates that electricity, that its electricity generated by that installation was from a renewable origin. So that's what, in very short and layman terms, energy attribute certificates do for us and how they help us.
Which is actually what we need. It's short and direct, to the point. Sorry, Raj.
Yeah, and Zhao, there is a few other terms that are similar around the world. So in North America and some other places, these are also called renewable energy credits. They're essentially the same thing. They're also called international or IRECs, International Renewable Energy Credits, or RECs for short. Those are all essentially the same. Stephen's correct. Some of the attributes are, what is the plant, where is it located, how many megawatts were produced, what year was it produced, et cetera, et cetera. So the certifications generally are the same. It just depends on what the unit is, where it is, functionally provides some attributes around the active.
Very interesting. And then, I mean, I guess you've already mentioned Europe and versus the US, but I think we'll focus more on Europe for this time around, because you guys are growing your footprint across the continent as well. And we know 2024 is going to be a massive year when it comes to energy and sustainability certificates and even regulations on the mainland. So outside of Brexit, basically. Can you maybe explain the challenges in standardizing protocols across different countries in the European Union for energy attribute certificates? Because I mean, the US, I guess, is 50 states, but it's one common language. There's a lot of common grounds. Europe, you've got 27 countries. And I don't know actually how many languages. I think it's 22 or 23 languages. So there's slightly different challenges to it.
Well, without going very deep into a complete governance lesson, because nobody likes that, yes, the European Union has 27 member states, and all these member states have different types of energy attribute certificates, although in essence they all operate the same. But there might be a different associated characteristic with it. What is more challenging in the market itself is that the European Union or all its member states don't operate a single grid. So that means if you use energy attribute certificates, these need to be located in a specific region. So they need to be part of a select grid. For instance, I cannot simply decide to use energy attribute certificates from a Romanian wind farm in Amsterdam for my data center because it's not connected to the same grid. So I don't know if that's necessarily a challenge, because I think we would all agree that it's better to generate your electricity closer to where you use it. But these are sometimes challenges. And what you also see is that member states sometimes put in directives as like, hey, data center industry, you need to use a very specific type of energy attribute certificate. So in Germany, there's currently legislation where they say, we only want you to use renewable electricity from non-subsidized assets. And that just means that we really need to dive deeper into the characteristics and into the metadata of each certificate to decide, hey, was this certificate generated by an asset that was currently receiving subsidies from the government, whatever government that is, local government, national government, or European government, and whether or not this fulfills that demand. So there is a lot of, you really need to be very detail-oriented to look at these. Fortunately, people are picking up the glove or the gauntlet in finding solutions to make this easy. But it's sometimes a challenge.
I think detail-oriented sums up the EU quite well, with a pinch of bureaucracy on top. No, but everything you said makes sense. And also, I mean, you do want to use energy as close to the source of production as possible, because one of the biggest waste of energy things that we do is actually the carrying of the energy to somewhere else. And a lot of it gets lost in the process of transfer. I don't know if Raj or Anand, you want to add anything else to that Stephen said around challenges?
So I think Raj and I have spoken about this a couple of times earlier as well. So I think a key challenge that we are facing is a common interface for reporting this information, right? So, is there an API of some kind that can actually be defined such that these can be tracked in exactly the same format, irrespective of where you're operating in the world? And then the question becomes like, it sounds like a great idea in theory, but the question rapidly becomes like, who's in charge of actually keeping that? Who's the holder of the schema? And given that hyperscalers are among the most sort of intensive energy buyers in the world today, as well as they have the sophistication from a software engineering standpoint, it would seem like there's sort of a natural fit there, right? The definition and the sort of maintenance of said schema. But I think we proposed this to the folks that we work with, and I think it's still an ongoing conversation, right? But I think I view this as one of the key issues. Raj, anything to add there? I know you've thought about this a while as well.
No. Yeah, it's the lack of efficiency, right? The ability for 27 countries to define their own rules is no different than 50 states defining their own rules, right? And what it creates is inefficiencies. And the lack of that efficiency makes it extremely difficult to manage this over a global portfolio. And so what companies like ours have to deal with is recognizing the regulatory changes that are occurring and then adapting country by country to what those rules are and how to actually work within the parameters of sustainability. Now, if we can get to some sort of standardization in how we report and how the regulations work, that's fantastic. To the extent that there are exceptions, you know, call it the 90% rule and 10% are exceptions, that's also fantastic. We're just not quite there yet.
Do you think, are you confident that this standardization can happen within the industry itself, or we will need a big push from governments or even the EU as a whole to really drive this? Because I guess when you get a lot of people at the table, a decision will take a very long time to be made. And when it comes to climate, time is not something unfortunately we have.
No question, you're right. I mean, this is going to take time to get to standardization, but some of it has already started, right? So financial reporting, IFRS has started looking at sustainability and how to standardize that into financial reporting. Now it's not quite there yet. There's still a lot of drafts. There's still a lot of conversations that are being had, et cetera. But you know, what's driving this is the EU essentially saying, hey, look, we have to start seeing sustainability reporting. It just makes sense to have it inside of the financial records of these public companies, et cetera, et cetera. So let's start moving towards that. Now, standardization of reporting is the starting point to standardization of regulatory framework, right? So once we can get the reporting side somewhat standardized, and again, let's look at the 80 to 90% rule, we then start looking at, okay, how do we then adapt that into the regulatory framework on, you know, governance and how, for example, these various renewable generators, you know, provide these certificates? Are they all standardized? Can they all be on a online platform that allows for that type of an efficiency? So there's ways to get there. We're probably 5 to 10 years away, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, well, it's always the starting point that's the hardest, I guess. But then we as long as we keep on track of things, we should be able to get to good ports. I was going to ask you, so I think we kind of answered already my next question, because it's around the role that legislation plays in promoting sustainable data centers development. But if you have anything else to add on that front, do let me know. I think the question really becomes, and we kind of touch it as well on 2024, it's what are the main considerations operators need to be addressing right now in terms of sustainable legislation that's coming into effect next year? Because I mean, I think it's by June next year, things will have changed a lot in terms of reporting. And even though some of the legislation is not directly targeted at data centers, it's every single company with more than 150 million euros in revenues, which pretty much is every data center company that operates in the world today. So what are the main considerations, things that operators should be looking at? And even you as EdgeConneX, how are you navigating that? Because you operate in several countries. So again, there's a common legislation, but there's also more local authorities.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start, and then I think Stephen will add to this. So look, I mean, we all know the legislation is coming. It's been in draft form, et cetera, for a couple of years. We've talked to our auditors and preparing for this, our financial auditors. We on the EdgeConneX side have already started publishing our sustainability reports for the last 3 years in order for us to get into this cycle to really address the EU requirements, right? So from a multi-country in the EU perspective, where we have a data center presence, we recognize the things we need to essentially report on. And it is a smaller subset than what we report in our sustainability report, which is fine. And there are some standardization to it, which is okay. The issue we're going to have is the standardization in the EU might or might not be the same standardization that's going to happen in the United States or in China or Japan or other places. So that's a problem to have in the future. But for now, I think we all recognize that reporting and regulations are coming around reporting and sustainability. The other thing that we are facing, and it's definitely going to be true for all data center operators, is the coordination of sustainability reporting between all of our customers and ourselves. That is going to be a lift. And how do we do that in an efficient manner? It's still to be determined. Stephen, do you want to continue?
Yeah, I think as EdgeConneX, we don't necessarily see new regulation as a threat. We see it as an opportunity, because this new regulation also creates a new playing field, and those that are able to meet these demands are the ones who are going to be meet and surpass these requirements are the companies that are going to be successful. Because, I mean, I think we can all agree here around this table that what we see happening outside with these excruciatingly hot summers, these catastrophic rainfalls that we see from here and there, is that is also not necessarily the world that we all want to live in, and that means that we all need to take action. And although we try as EdgeConneX, and I think we're quite successful in staying ahead of the curve and staying ahead of this regulation, I think these rules are simply just a way to make sure, hey, look, this is the bar, this is the pace, this is the how do you call it? The minimum requirement that you need to meet. And hopefully those minimum requirements also push new innovative companies into the market that are coming up with new inventive solutions, challenging the status quo and going so much further, being it AI, it could also be new types of equipment, or just a complete rethink of how for our industry, how a data center would work, or how we design it. So I think that's always the most key points to keep in mind. Rules are never fun, but I think they're a necessity in the world where we live in.
Yeah, I think you guys raised quite a few good points. I mean, especially on the designing of the data center facility itself. And when we look into downpours, for example, some data centers in Europe are now building underground water containers to really take all the water in, so there's no flooding into the data center, and they built a lot higher than they used to, a lot further away from the ground than they used to be in the old days. And then Raj, to your point as well, I think you actually raised a very good point, the collaboration between customers and operators, and how that relationship is going to work around sustainability. I think that's actually a topic that no one has touched upon yet. And I think it comes back to everything that we're talking, because we're not even there as an industry, as the givers of the power to host all this. So I think that's the next step. So that's a very interesting step. And before we get into 2024, we still have some winter to get through. So, I mean, last year, of course, we had the unfortunate invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which created a massive energy crisis across Europe. There was a lot of, there were a few headlines about data centers running out of power. There was a lot of diesel generators being brought in, for worst case scenarios. What do you think are the potential risks for the 2023 winter around energy shortfalls? Are we in the same place? Are we in a better place? And how is EdgeConneX itself also preparing for the European winter this year?
I think if we look 1 or 2 years back, then we see that LNG capacity has doubled, maybe even tripled, with floating LNG plants. So the ability to redirect gas flows to Europe in order to generate thermal electricity throughout the wintertime, and to heat homes, we are in a more secure position. Now, again, last year was not a cold snap winter, or I mean, we didn't see a polar winter in Europe. So that may change next year, because nobody knows what's going to happen. But if we have a similar winter as we had in the past, then I don't necessarily see significant issues unless something strange happens. Of course, as a data center industry, we are very well prepared for this. Last winter, we also went through these exercises time and time again with all our customers. And we passed all those audits with flying colors. But that's just simply because our data centers store a significant amount of diesel fuel. We make sure that we have access to diesel supplies. And fortunately, these days, you also have something that's called HVO, a more renewable option. So actually, you have 2 diverse sources that you could use, and all our generators are capable to run on both without any sort of adaptation. So just requires in your sustainability report a little bit more calculation to determine what the actual CO2 emissions was of this blend that you threw in it. But I think that's limited of that's just a minor thing. So I think we are in a very good spot. And an additional pro thing is that for now in Europe, EdgeConneX is present in markets where there are very solid TSOs and DSOs who have demand-side management mechanisms in place that can do that. But also last winter, we have also played with air supply temperatures in order to reduce the mechanical cooling in the facilities to make sure that we increase the efficiency of the plant a little bit further, reducing the energy consumption. So we have been, definitely looking into it.
Hopefully, won't be as worrying as last year. Sorry, Raj.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. If you look at the macro perspective of Europe, 2023, there's much more gas storage that has already been put in place versus 2022, which was really the big worry, right? Without enough gas storage in place, if the pipelines from Russia were, for example, completely cut and it was a very cold winter, things could have gotten very harsh. Now, those scenarios did not happen. So in preparations for 2023, if you look at the forward curves of gas, if you look at gas storage, if you look at the overall macroeconomics of Europe and how power pricing has significantly dropped since the gas crisis in 2022, it's believed to be, or it's believed that the winter isn't going to be a significant event as compared to last year. It will look more like previous years, where of course, power prices are going to go up some because, of course, gas is going to be used more, but it's not going to be quadrupling or more of power.
I was thinking maybe a sidelight question, because you guys have access to this sort of information. You can easily compare the last maybe 24 months. Is power pricing still, let's say, almost out of control, or is it in a better place than it was even just 12 months ago? Have you seen a big shift in power pricing?
Yeah, it's in a much better place in Europe than 12 months ago. I mean, that's fundamentally the case. And then the forward curves have all stabilized as well. Look, are we back at 2021 power pricing? No, of course not. Are we towards that trajectory? Yes, we are. Now, likely it's going to be higher due to inflation and other environmental factors in 2021. Fair point. But if you look at the overall numbers and the forward curves, et cetera, we're going back towards what would most analysts would call a normality of power and gas pricing in Europe.
That's good to hear. Finally, some good news.
And what you even see now these days, especially for a business such as data centers, is that you see negative power prices pop up everywhere. In part due to the success or the push of renewable energy being generated at homes. I think, especially here, if I look around here in the Netherlands, the sheer amount of people who in the last 2 years put solar panels on their roofs has been amazing. I think last year, 3 or 4 gigawatts of additional solar-based residential PV systems were installed, which is definitely during the summer driving down power prices into the negative areas. But that does mean that the difference between winter and summer is exacerbated due to this. So even if the overall power prices drop, the volatility in the pricing will increase due to changes in how the market operates and how the market is structured.
It's interesting because it really brings in the macroeconomics of every country into play, because of course the Nordics, we know it's the government probably subsidize a lot more the home developments of green energies versus the southern of Europe, which is a bit harder for people to afford solar panels, for example, which will create different great challenges on that front. But then also what you guys were just saying, I also thought there's also the point of making when will data centers be able to sell excess energy that they might produce at their own sites back to the grid. And I think that's almost like a whole different conversation. But Anand, I would like to bring you on to the discussion as well, because I know we've kind of mentioned already some different designs and methods of building a new data center or building data centers for the new era of sustainability. But how is EdgeConneX kind of moving away from the traditional data center design to make them more appealing and environmentally friendly on the back of everything we're just saying?
Yeah, I would say that there are a few pillars that I think we've invested in and we continue to sort of dive into. The first is around efficiency. So, clearly the greenest electron is the one that you don't consume, right? So, in terms of improving our operating efficiency, specifically our PUEs, like we've been continuously sort of working on that. So an ongoing program to kind of manage our PUEs to industry leading or world class standards. So that's the first part. The second part is around our commitment to not using water. So we intend to be zero water use in the near future. So in that regard, our newer designs are focusing on higher efficiency approaches to cool data centers without water. So that's the second part. I think the third aspect is a little bit harder to describe because it's still somewhat nebulous, which is how is data center design itself evolving as the nature of compute workloads changes. Because IT workloads are going to consume power, like we already know that. The question is around all the surrounding infrastructure and the carbon impact of the surrounding infrastructure and actually building a facility and keeping it up and running. So AI, for example, requires pretty dense compute. So what are the design choices that we make to kind of support that density of compute? And can we actually push the envelope further in terms of reducing our carbon footprint, say scope 3, for example, in addition to running even more efficiently with some of the newer technologies that are out there. So I would say that these are the areas that we've kind of focused on and we continue to sort of invest in.
Okay. Raj, Stephen, do you want to add anything else into the design before we go into the AI bandwagon? Because that's the hot word at the moment. So I guess, I mean,
Yeah.
so Anand, you mentioned AI. So AI is, of course, the big headline of this year. I'll say for the entire year, AI is really the big keywords for 2023. How is AI going to change the data center? Because we're talking about 10 times more of everything. It's 10 times more power, 10 times more computing capacity, 10 times more and more. And we are only really at the beginning of this first wave, or several waves, the first wave of several waves that we're going to experience within the AI tsunami, the AI era, age, whatever we want to call it. So my first question would be maybe, first, is this all a hype, or we are actually going to a new stage of development? Secondly, how is AI going to benefit the data center operations around sustainability? So who would like to? Yeah.
I can start, Raj, or Stephen, please jump in. So it's certainly not hype, right? There's a lot of there's a lot of interest that that's in the media right now for sure. But I don't think we can call it necessarily hype because there are business models that are coming out which are likely going to be pretty profitable for multiple players. I think though, from a business standpoint, the interesting question is, predicting the winners and losers out of all of this, but that's not what we're here to do. But I think what you're asking is there like a genuine movement that's fundamentally changing computing? I think the short answer is yes, right? Like that is happening. Now, the second part of the question that you asked is how does this actually impact data center design, or what does this mean for data centers? So if you look at AI capacity, there's basically two tranches, right? One is training and the other is inference. So you use a ton of data to train a model, and then you use that trained model to provide results to customers. Could be many different kinds of use cases. So currently, because we're so early in the AI cycle, a lot of the investment that's going in is to build training facilities, which have certain characteristics. Number one, they don't really need to be particularly close to end customers, so you can pick locations with cheaper power. And in a lot of the cases today, cheaper power means greener power, because wind and solar right now on a LCOE basis are actually the cheapest forms of power. This is a happy coincidence which we should absolutely exploit. So that's number one. So I think we are going to see a greening of overall data center capacity simply because of the nature of the problem. The second aspect is around efficiency. So as you know, the densities of AI workloads is quite a bit higher. I would say roughly an order of magnitude higher than what we've been traditionally used to seeing. which allows for certain interesting approaches as far as heat removal is concerned. Like, for example, direct liquid cooling and the temperatures with which you're able to actually run that system are a lot more forgiving. So I think it opens the door to higher efficiencies of operation. And then the third is around space planning itself. If you're deploying IT workloads which are 10 times more computer intensive, do you really need the same amount of space? And space translates to it translates to concrete and it translates to steel, all of which are pretty carbon intensive. So on the whole, it seems I'm cautiously optimistic that there is a line of sight to doing things in a more carbon efficient way. I think on the inferencing side, it's too early to tell whether there's going to be displacement of existing capacity or it's going to be additive. Like the industry has historically been bad at predicting displacements of capacities. In what has generally happened during these transitions is that computing has always grown. I think that's the same with AI. So I suspect that we are going to see more demand for latency sensitive capacity in some of these major markets. But the implications for designs of those, I think it's just too early to tell right now how it's going to play.
Very interesting.
And then from a sustainability standpoint, right, one of the things that you were asking is, are these newer data centers, what are some of the challenges with sustainability? Well, of course, the first is, where are you going to get the power from? Because again, this is higher order magnitudes of power. And then as Anand stated, if you can get green power, this of course solves two problems. But the other is most green power is transient in nature. It's not necessarily consistent 24/7. So you have to augment that. And then how do you make that sustainable in nature, especially since it's going to be significantly higher power requirements is going to be a challenge. We are going to face that as an overall industry. There are predictions currently in the market that data centers use, let's call it south of 1% of the power worldwide, but with AI, it could go up to 5 to 10% of the power worldwide. And so it is a huge growth in power consumption. So that implies we need to have significant, we'll call it green solutions in order to handle that additional power demand.
With those numbers, it's always interesting to think as well that even though it might grow from 1 to 5, if there weren't sustainability practices in place, they could actually grow to well beyond 20%. So the fact that the industry is more than doubling every few years, we are not.
Well, I think so. There are two things. So as Raj mentioned, the transient nature of renewables is going to be a definitive challenge. So either on the demand side, as a data center, we need to figure out how to deal with it, or on the supply side, we need to figure out what new technologies there are that are sustainable and renewable, i.e. not fossil fuel based, that can close the gaps when you need it. On the other hand, we don't need to, or we must not underestimate the amount of CO2 emissions or embodied carbon is in building a data center. Every data center needs backup generators. Every data center needs cooling equipment. It needs a room. It needs space. That all has associated carbon emissions with it. And that does not necessarily have to be the problem, but our manufacturers, and we need to work together with our manufacturers to make sure that we reduce the embodied carbon over the life cycle of the equipment. And hopefully at the same time, once after 15 or 20 years, this facility is obsolete, the equipment can be taken and can be recycled, hopefully in a circular manner. So not just take this generator, pull out all the metal parts and throw it in a steel mill and trying to melt it again and make new steel. But how can that be taken apart so that the constituting components can directly be used for something new? That requires a complete rethink of the design. But it also, again, provides opportunity for increasing the maintainability of the equipment and solving other challenges as well. But that's not only a challenge for us, but it's definitely a challenge for those players from our perspective that are higher up the food chain, just in a similar way as that our customers are looking at us to improve whatever we can. So collaboration will be a very important topic going forward, because this is stuff that Anand, Raj, and we can do by ourselves, and that we as EdgeConneX cannot do by ourselves.
No, that's an extremely good point, because one, it would also bring down the OPEX slightly, I guess, over the years. But it's one thing that we don't really talk about. It's what happens after the facility is built, because we all see the headlines of a new data center is being built, a new data center is opened, but then no one goes back and looks into the data center 5-10 years later, and really looks into how much more has gone into it and how much more has come out of it. And then the life cycle aspect of things, we are starting to see a few companies focusing on the life cycle of data center components. I think at the moment, a lot of focus is actually shipping those things into more emerging markets. But that's probably not the most sustainable way in the long term of the whole life cycle idea. I was also thinking as well, maybe a bit of a sidelight question. I know you guys do this at EdgeConneX. It's so this all AI is going to demand more data centers. Of course, we build them with sustainability in mind. But for the person down the road, for the neighbors of the data center building, they will just see the cranes going up, they'll see the trucks coming in, they'll see a lot of things being offloaded, and they might not understand what's going on in this. So how can we really bring the communities into what's happening around Europe with these new buildings going up? And sometimes they are not the most visually appealing for buildings to look at as well. So some people might look at it and say, this is a great box, this probably pollutes a lot, we don't want this in our backyard. When it's actually the most efficient facilities in the industrial space.
Without going into specific projects that we are currently working on, we have identified that community outreach will be one of the key items in the development of new data centers in order to get them successful. I think in recent years we've seen in most Western or Northern European countries that the data center industry is no longer in such a positive limelight as it might have been 20 years ago. So that has all sorts of reasons underpinning it, but I mean, it is what it is. It's a fact of life. So that means that people will more easily appeal against a data center. So that's where community outreach comes in. I think what I have experienced from my day-to-day work is just simply going to those residents and have a talk with them if they are concerned. Having short lines between your operations team and them is such a benefit. So they need to be able to pick up the phone and call you in like, hey, I see that, or I mean, I'm experiencing noise issues. What can you do? Because that also teaches you something. I mean, we are usually on the inside, we do walk around, but it does not necessarily mean that we hear something when something is wrong. This could be an indication that something is going wrong that we need to fix. And by this community outreach, it seems by now that we have been able to reduce the mechanical cooling energy consumption by about 5% in a facility in Amsterdam. So that was a great result because the neighbors helped us point into a direction, what they heard in finding a solution. And we want to do this in a more structured manner. So not only after effects, so the data center is here and we are creating a negative externality, but also more upfront in, hey, we are going to build a data center here, or we want to build a data center here. What would you like to see or experience? And that can also help us both ways. So in most jurisdictions, you have something called a beautification committee, Welstand or whatever, and they usually say, I want a green facade that has building and integrated photovoltaics, and it also needs to store water and 4 or 5 other conflicting requirements. Now, community outreach gives you the possibility to include them in the decision making. So it's telling them, hey, look, we could have a beautiful architectural design with a sort of with natural materials or a beautiful visual lines, or we can make it a green facade, or you can do building integrated photovoltaics. And if they say, look, we really want the green facade, then we just place the green facade, and it gives us one more argument to the authority stating, hey, look, the residents want the green facade, so can we just go for that one instead of you telling you want everything in something that doesn't work? So again, this also provides a great opportunity for future data centers. And sometimes it could be as simple as somebody says, "Hey, look, could you please change the planting around the facility, the landscaping, the greenscaping, because I have issues with hay fever, and please don't plant these pollen." So just listening and being open to it and not seeing it as criticism can help so much in resolving issues, and also shows that you truly care about them and that you're just not there to unload all these negative externalities to the local community.
It really is coming back to being human to other humans, and just making sure that everyone is happy about what's happening and doing the homework.
It's really great that you say that, because what we see in our day to day is that everything is polarizing so much, that people are standing on a soapbox yelling to the other person, and the other person is yelling back at them, and both state that they are right, and they forget to listen on what really matters. And I think, especially with the challenges that we see, we don't have time to do a shouting contest. We really need to work together in resolving these issues. And sometimes that means a small step back in order to take a leap forward.
Absolutely, and that's how most changes happen in history. It is when you have the maturity to take a step back to then build a solid foundation for the next phase of development of, in this case, of a whole industry. I was going to ask as well. So taking into account, kind of bringing everything home now. So taking into account everything we're saying about sustainability, AI, communities, and then of course legislations and certificates. What's EdgeConneX working for the near long-term future in Europe? So we can talk about either markets, we can talk about technologies. Give us just a little bit of a preview of what you guys are doing on the grounds across Europe.
Yeah, so I'll start from kind of a power perspective, in a overarching perspective. I think Stephen and Anand can join in. So look, from an EdgeConneX standpoint, we are owned by EQT, European company. We have desires to significantly grow our presence in the EMEA area, in orders of magnitudes of doubling or tripling our size. So that means we will be expanding to more countries, expanding within the countries we're in to new facilities. This is being driven by our customers, right? So a lot of our customers, per some of the topics we just talked about, AI, additional cloud-based infrastructure, et cetera, it's all growing. Electric vehicles are coming on, et cetera. These are all going to require more data centers. So we are thinking about it from how to make our portfolio both greener now and green into the future. And so there is a lot of work we're doing on the power side to procure some PPAs or power purchase agreements, if you will, as well as how can we be additive in some future green sustainable solutions as well. So, but the overarching position is we will be growing. We have some really aggressive growth targets, and it's likely to further expand our footprint in numerous countries inside of Europe. Stephen or Anand?
Yeah, interesting to see the tier 2 locations. But yeah, so Anand.
Not too much to add there. I think Raj did justice to that question. But yeah, I'll defer to Stephen here. So
Freeway story in my lap. So I think one of the big wins, or one of our major goals for 2030, will be making sure what I just mentioned, the community outreach, hopefully improving the public perception of these projects and what they bring, and also what future opportunities and technologies they can unlock for a local economy, or the European economy, or American economy as a whole. Because AI will be similar to what the Industrial Revolution was back then. We just need to step over, or not step over, we need to resolve all the negative stuff that comes from it. And at the other hand, I think one of the things going forward will be the dealing with wastes, electronic wastes by our customer, and the waste generated by our facilities, either as operational waste or as end of life, or after 15 years when you need to refurb it. Those will be things going forward, where we will take leaps and bounds and improve the way how our industry operates.
It all comes really down to collaboration, inclusivity. Sorry,
I would sort of just close by saying that I think the data center industry and our data center community has a responsibility to kind of show that we're not just resource vampires, right? We don't just show up, take all the power, take all the water, and cause other issues for communities. I think we have to be proactive in kind of demonstrating our commitments to sustainability, whether it's running 24/7 carbon free, or whether it's like time-based matching of our energy consumption, net zero water use, what have you. So I think like that is going to be a role that, as Kevin said, we have to be much more proactive about. And it's not just EdgeConneX. I think it's the industry as a whole, because data centers are such sort of central components of today's modern economy, right? So it's almost like it's our duty to do that.
I would almost go as far as saying they are the modern economy, because without them, we don't really have an economy anymore, because we are so reliant on it.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say, because I mean, we are now in the third quarter of the year, sorry, in the fourth quarter of the year, and then of course with this comes all the projections and predictions for the next year. So that'll be my closing question to you, and I'd like to hear something from each one of you around what's your prediction for 2024 around data center sustainability, and it does not have to be related to EdgeConneX. It can be an industry-wide prediction. So if we sit here in 12 months' time again, what do you expect to have happened next year? We can go around the room if you want to, so you can go in and ends.
Sure, I'll take one a little bit less from what we call the classical sustainability, more of what I see in my day-to-day project management activities. I think we will see a greater drive towards occupational health and safety. Building all these data centers always involves risks. And what we will see is a continuing drive forward to reduce the incident rates as well as the long-term injury rates. Because I think what is most important is that when people work for you on your own project, it's important that they also go home to their families and are also able to care for these. I think CO2 emissions are great and are a very important thing to keep in mind, but also the social aspect in light of safety, but also a continuing strive to make sure that everybody is part of this transition and everybody can be part of EdgeConneX, to be inclusive, to give people a place and belonging is so important to be successful in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think health and safety, and unfortunately, we have seen some news in the last few weeks of 2 cases where things haven't gone very well around construction of data centers. So I think that's a very important part as well that we don't talk as often as we should probably in this sector, the health and safety side of things. Any other predictions you guys would like to throw on the table?
So I think we are going to see continued constraints around power availability for data centers. And I think the industry is going to have to get creative about dealing with them. And I don't really have any technology predictions as to how it's all going to play out, but I think the problem is going to get worse before it gets better.
As often is the case, and then it will require the brains of the industry to come together. And again, together is the key word again, to really solve those issues. Raj, any closing words?
About 100 years ago, we had start of what was called the assembly line, right? And where it was a journey to develop higher efficiencies to build automobiles. Nowadays, we are starting this conversation around artificial intelligence and how it will essentially further modernize the world, whether it's in food, whether it's in power, whether it's in any number of facets around what we do in the industry. And so data centers will be at the central hub of this wheel. How this further develops in the next 12 months to the next 10 years is to be determined. But I think there will be significant developments in the data center industry that are going to be driven by artificial intelligence, that are going to be driven by electric vehicles and further electrification. And there are going to be challenges, as Anand and Stefan said, whether it's occupational health, whether it's power availability, they're going to be challenges. But that's what this industry will have to overcome.
Yeah, and as you all said as well at the beginning, it's where there's challenges, there's opportunities. So we just got to make sure that we, as an industry, keep our eyes open towards the opportunity sides of these challenging periods, and particularly next year. Well, I mean, with that said, I mean, Anand Ramesh, Senior Vice President of Advanced Technology, Rash Shudgar, Chief Power Officer, sorry, of EdgeConneX as well, and Steven Sprockholt, Vice President of Project Management and Sustainability. Thank you so much for talking to me. As for your home, thank you for watching, and do check our website. Give us a follow on social media for more breaking news and timely news from across the digital infrastructure sector worldwide. At Tech Capital, you lead, we report. Bye for now.